Welcome to The Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. Well, this month we're going to be talking about money. Why is it so hard? Why do we make it so hard? And how do we do it? How do we engage in this conversation? Money is so taboo, it's so off limits, and we continue to reinforce this idea that it's taboo and off limits because we keep not talking about it, which makes it seem taboo and off limits. And we need to take the lead in making it a dialogue that seems more regular, more intuitive, more consistent, so that people feel less anxious about it. They feel more open to seeking guidance and wisdom about it. And I actually think that that breaks open in the church. I think it is the church's job to lead this conversation and move us in a direction of having money just be a thing that we talk about. And it's not a big deal. The thing I find so fascinating is how often Jesus talked about money. Half of his parables are about money. He is talking about this topic all the time in the Gospels. How often is the church talking about it? Once a year? Maybe? Maybe every now and then when they're running a building campaign or they're trying to raise money for some other opportunity that they're really wanting to fund. When we are only talking about money when it's awkward, it means that money is awkward, and we keep reinforcing in our congregations that money is something we really don't talk about unless we need some of it. And so I want to address these issues. I want to talk about what it looks like for us to step into a more healthy dialogue around money. And in my mind, that actually happens at two different levels. So this month, we're going to be talking about this topic of discussing money first today at this higher congregational level. How do we talk about it corporately? How do we lead this discussion among all of our people in the church that we're a part of? So I'm talking to you, church leaders, your stewardship pastors, your lead pastors, speaking, teaching team. This is the group that needs to be comfortable with this conversation. And then next time, on the next episode, we're going to talk about how to bring that down to a granular level. We're going to talk about coaching, walking one-on-one, side by side with people and giving them access to ongoing dialogue and wisdom as they actually try to apply these things to their life. In my mind, those are two very different conversations, but we need to be having both of them. And so today we're going to talk about that congregational level. How do we do this in the midst of a congregation that's mixed with all kinds of people in all sorts of different circumstances? It seems daunting, to say the least, to step into this conversation when we know the people that are listening have all kinds of different thoughts and opinions and experiences and family backgrounds. And so that feels really scary because we can't touch all of those points. And I agree. We can't touch all those points. We can't make sure we get all those things right. But that is not a reason to abstain from this conversation, to abdicate our leadership in helping people understand how to steward God's resources. Money is hard to talk about because it is experienced so specifically, and so we don't know how to address those specific needs. But it's also hard to talk about because it immediately tends to put people on the defensive to the degree that there is shame and guilt built up in the way they've handled money, whether that's shame related to the debt that they've built up, or it's guilt related to a lifestyle that they feel might be tipping towards the edge of selfishness. It's really easy for things to trigger people and have their emotions move them to defensiveness. And so I get it. I get that it's scary. I get that it's hard. And we as a Big C church have also confused the issue because we really only talk about it when we're asking for some. We only tie stewardship to generosity. We talk about stewardship in the context of giving more money to this thing that we're doing as a church. And so in our congregation's mind, those two are one and the same, but they are not the same. Stewardship and generosity are different things. And we did a whole podcast about that topic. I would encourage you to go back and listen to it, because we really need to break these things apart and talk about stewardship regularly, particularly when we're not talking about generosity and giving. Look, Jesus identified money as the biggest rival for our hearts. He talks constantly in the Gospels about the potential for us to get tripped up and fall in love with what money can give us. And so he sees this as a really high priority, and we need to as well. We see financial stewardship as a key component of Christian discipleship. If we aren't leading our people in what it looks like to honor God this way, we are missing out on really giving them some foundational truth that establishes contentment and steadiness and peace in their lives and in their families. We need to be not just willing to do it, but excited to step into this conversation. So let's talk about the fact that we're addressing these higher level conversations in a room full of people that are in different circumstances. Recognize that that's the situation, and that's why we want to stay at the higher level conversation. The actual application of how to live out faithful stewardship may need to be a more one-on-one journey with a financial coach. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But if that financial coach is leading those individuals without the context of a really strong biblical understanding of financial stewardship, what it looks like to honor God with his resources, then even those applications get muddied because we don't know why we're doing it. And so at the congregational level, we need to be really intentional about talking about the big ideas of faithful stewardship. We need to be pointing people, no matter what your circumstances, to the idea that stewardship is the key, not ownership. We need to be in a position of recognizing we don't own anything. And when we do that, we can become more diligent earners, more prudent spenders. We'll become generous givers and wise savers and cautious debtors. The ideas are all the same for everyone in the room. And so we can acknowledge right out of the gate, hey, look, we're not giving the blocking and tackling advice. We're not actually going to specify what your situation might need, because everyone's circumstances are different. But how we honor God in the general terms, how we step into faithful stewardship, what that looks like across the big ideas always applies, no matter what your circumstance is. And so we want to be setting the foundational groundwork. We want to be able to tell our people this is what it looks like always in the bigger sense of stewardship instead of ownership. This is what it looks like always in the context of diligent earning. This is how we want to think about our spending, that we will spend money. We will be using these resources for ourselves, but a prudent spender is going to know exactly what they did with God's resources and why they chose to do that. So some of those big ideas will be so helpful then to frame the individual experience and application that they may get in a one-on-one coaching circumstance. But we can't do these things completely isolated from each other. We can't just talk in big idea pictures and then say, good luck with that. We actually have no idea how to guide you. And we can't give guidance without those big idea constructs. And so that's why these go so well together, and they need to be working in tandem. And so in that congregational level, we're talking high level, high ideas, biblical mandates of this is what it looks like in general, not in specific. And that's how we can get more confident to step into this conversation, because we're avoiding those tripping hazards of telling someone a specific around particular order of debt payment, for example, when someone might raise their hand and say, that doesn't apply to me, or a particular level of giving that we want to call people to specifically. And then you have someone who's just trying to make sure they keep their lights on. And those conversations break down really quickly when we're giving specific applications that aren't universal. At the congregational level, we want to be talking big ideas that are universally applicable, but how we actually live them out may be more uniquely designed in a one-on-one coaching relationship that helps walk that journey out. One of the most important pieces to this puzzle at that congregational level is to always separate the big ideas of stewardship from fundraising campaigns, capital campaigns, building campaigns, because when we marry those two, the water gets really muddy really fast. And by definition, we are combining the idea of generosity with a practical application of give to this thing. And you can see, just as we talked about, that when we get specific, we alienate people in the room, we trigger them emotionally, we get them spun up based on their background, based on their situation. We need to be talking the general concepts of stewardship completely separately from an ask for some of their resources, because we will lose them. We will feel inauthentic. We will feel like this actually is just a workaround to get more money for this campaign we're running if we only talk about money when we're asking for money. And so I highly recommend, for those of you who are leading congregations, make this a regular rhythm of conversation in your church context, no matter what. If you're doing great financially, you're still talking about money. If you're doing poorly financially, you're still talking about money, but you're not asking for it. It needs to be a conversation that becomes less taboo and more common in order for people to feel safe to receive these ideas without feeling like it's a bait and switch. While you're having these high-level conversations, you're sharing the things that Jesus says about money. You're sharing the things that Scripture teaches us about money. Don't shy away from the fact that some of these things are hard. Jesus was not wishy-washy on this stuff. He said things like, it is really hard for a wealthy person to enter the kingdom of God. It's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. He talked about money in a way that was relatively extreme, and it made people a little uncomfortable, to say the least. That's okay. We want to stir this conversation, not in a way that is offensive, but we do want to be confident in the fact that this is a topic that Jesus was really clear on. He was consistently pointing people to the fact that money is the biggest rival for our hearts, and we need to have a plan for how we're going to approach it. So the idea in the conversation with your entire congregation is the why and the what. Why do we want to honor God with his resources? And what does that look like in general? The how conversation is better had in individual situations where we can actually talk specifics. When we give how applications in the context of the big congregation, we will lose people because they'll immediately eject. They'll say, well, I can't do that. That doesn't apply to me, or that's not right. That won't work for my family. And then we lose all of the other foundation that we're trying to build because we moved into a how that felt impossible. The what and the why should not feel impossible. It is always possible to honor God with his resources. It is always possible to be a faithful steward, a diligent earner, a prudent spender, a wise saver, and a cautious debtor. Those things at the high level are always possible. Once we start talking specifics and we're losing people where that specific doesn't apply, then we lose them on those bigger issues as well. And so it's really, really important that we focus on the why and the what in the congregation, and we let financial coaches step into this specific how. This is such an incredible opportunity for the church to create a healthier understanding and relationship with money for their congregations, to help release anxiety and tension and stress and conflict from marriages. This is a place we should be investing a lot of attention into. We at Good Sense are so passionate about this. We believe this is a foundational value that the church needs to be engaged in, and we love helping churches engage in it. And so if you are in one of those roles, that lead pastor role, the stewardship pastor role, and you're like, yeah, this sounds great, how do we do it? Reach out, email me, go to goodsensemovement.org and get connected to us. And we are more than happy to help you engage with your people in this conversation so that you can unlock the beauty and the freedom that faithful stewardship provides for your entire church. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you all have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.